Hello and welcome back to another, uh, well, it's more demo videos than a lecture series, I guess. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the problems in your study guide, okay? So what I did this time, something a little different. I said complete exercise 4-2, and I took a picture out of our textbook and kind of embedded it into the Word document. So we're going to work on this together. Now, if you haven't, please pause the video, try it on your own first. Just give it a try. The only really way to learn this stuff is just to keep trying it and work with it. Okay, I could sit here and demo it till the cows come home. The only way for you to really um, gain that understanding is just by working on it. Okay, so we're going to do exercise 4-2. Okay, remember we said in the lecture video we're doing nothing more than, or we're not going to do anything except the weighted average method. Okay, don't worry about FIFO. So what this problem wants us to do is it really wants us to calculate that first step in process costing of calculating the equivalent unit of production. Okay, it's all we have to do here. So this problem is geared towards step one, which is calculate the equivalent unit of production. Okay, so remember, in order for us to calculate the equivalent unit of production, we need to take into account the units that were completed and transferred out, and we need to calculate that equivalent units in ending work in process. Okay, very easy to do. So if you notice, they tell us that, or they give us the beginning WIP in our little chart here. They tell us that, hey, beginning WIP, October 1st, we had 30,000 units. With respect, those 30,000 units with respect to material was 65% complete. With respect to conversion cost was 30% complete. Great. Then they tell us, oh, by the way, your ending WIP on October 31st, you had 15,000 units. So 15,000 units were still in production, okay? Of those 15,000 partially completed units, they were 80% complete with respect to material and 40% complete with respect to conversion costs. Great. So remember, step one of, rephrase that, part one of step one, and step one again is calculating equivalent units of production. So part one says account for the units that were transferred out. That's easy. So I'm going to say units transferred out. How many were there? Well, if we read that little sentence underneath there, it says, hey, the department started 175,000 units into production during the month, and they transferred out 190,000 completed units to the next department. Okay, so what that means is we started 175,000 units. During the month, we completed, and we're one department, we completed and transferred out 190,000 units. That means that we added all the material and conversion costs that we needed to for our department. Then we transferred it on to the next department. That next department's going to add their conversion costs, their material costs, and it's going to keep on going down the line until it's finished. So, problem already tells us we have 190,000 units completed and transferred out. So that means the equivalent units of production with respect to material and conversion costs has to begin at 190,000 because those units were completed and transferred out. Okay? The next thing I need to do, and I'm going to abbreviate here, I'm going to figure out what the equivalent units are in my ending WIP. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? How many units do I have in ending WIP? Well, my chart tells me I got 15,000 partially completed units. Great. So I'm going to figure out what the equivalent units of production are with respect to material. Well, if I take that 15,000 and I multiply it by the percent completed with respect to material, which is 80%, that gives me 12,000 units. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing with respect to conversion costs. Well, conversion costs are, I added 40% to that ending WIP. Okay? Again, what are my ending units? Well, the problem already tells us that I have 15,000 partially completed units. Sorry, 15,000 times what percent are those 15,000 units completed with respect to conversion? 40%. So that means based on conversion costs, 40% of 15,000, 6,000. Okay? So now I can figure out what the equivalent, and I'm going to abbreviate, unit of production is, my EUP. Again, I add units transferred out and the equivalent units in ending inventory for material and for conversion costs. So for material, I have 202,000 equivalent units. I figured that out. Pretty easy. I took the the units transferred out of 190,000 plus the 12,000 equivalent units with respect to material that are still sitting in ending inventory. I have 202,000 equivalent units of production. How many equivalent units of production do I have with respect to conversion costs? I do the same thing. I add the units transferred out plus the equivalent units that are still sitting in ending inventory or ending WIP. 190,000 plus the 6,000 gives me 196,000. That is my equivalent unit of production with respect to conversion costs. Okay? Again, make sure you know the parts to calculating the equivalent unit of production, which is step one. Okay? First thing I got to do is figure out how many units were transferred out. If they were transferred out, that means they have to be 100% complete. That's number one. Number two, I need to calculate the ending units, I need to calculate the equivalent units in ending WIP. I take the units that they give me, meaning the work in process as of October 31st, there's 15,000 partially completed units. Great. I ask myself, okay, since I have 15,000 partially completed units, with respect to material, how much are they complete? With respect to conversion cost, how much are those 15,000 units completed, right? Remember, we said that when we're thinking of equivalent units, we need to think of it as we have a large number of partially completed units. But if we looked at it from a different angle, how much of these would be completed, right? I know I got 15,000 that are partially completed, but with the amount of material that I've added and the amount of conversion costs that I've added, how much would technically be complete? Well, 12,000 and 6,000, okay? Third part, you add up that beginning or the units transferred out plus the equivalent units in ending WIP. That gives you your equivalent unit of production, okay? Very simple. Now you're going to have to do that in Connect, okay? So this problem will definitely help you out there, okay? Hopefully you took down notes. If not, maybe go back, jot down a few notes. I walk through the steps there. Now the next thing we got to do is problem, well, it's 10 in your study guide. It says, hey, complete exercise 4-3. Okay, I can do that. Exercise 4-3 is really step 2 of implementing that weighted average method, right? Step 2 says, hey, after I calculate the equivalent units of production, which is step 1, I need to do step 2. Step 2 is calculate the cost per equivalent unit. I can do that very easy, okay? Remember, we need to take the cost of beginning WIP. We need to take the cost added during the period and add those up for both materials and conversion costs. We then divide by the equivalent unit of production. That gives us the cost per equivalent unit, okay? Now, this problem's a little wonky in the sense of it doesn't take conversion costs, meaning labor and overhead, and lump them together as conversion costs. It separates them out. That's okay. The process is still the same, okay? So the first thing we need to account for is the cost of beginning WIP, okay? Well, we're just plugging and chugging at this point because guess what? The chart says, hey, work in process as of May 31st. Here's the costs you have in beginning WIP with respect to material, labor, and overhead. I'm just going to plug those in. So I have 18,000, 5,500, and 27,500. So again, step 2, calculate the cost of, calculate the cost per equivalent unit, okay? Part 1, get your costs of beginning WIP, right? They have to give them to us. They did, okay? Part 2, add the costs or include the costs that were added during the period. So I'm going to take my costs, helps if you can spell, costs added during the period, okay? Well, they tell us costs added during May for material, labor, and overhead. I just add those in, okay? So for material, we added $238,900 worth of cost. Labor, during the month of May, we added $80,300. Overhead, how much cost did we add? $401,500, okay? So now I need to calculate the total cost. How do I do that? Well, again, with respect to material, labor, and overhead, I take the beginning costs, or the costs that were in beginning WIP, and then I add the costs that were added during the period. So my total cost with respect to material, $256,900. With respect to labor, $85,800. And with respect to overhead, I have $429,000. Okay, that's my total cost. Now, so once I calculate my total cost, and I'm just going to underline these here, and I'm going to double underline these puppies right here. Okay. Now the next thing I need to do is take my equivalent unit of production. Okay. Guess what? They give us the equivalent units of production. Okay. With respect to material, it's 35,000. With respect to labor, it's 33,000 units. And with respect to overhead, it's 33,000 units. Okay. Now, when you see this equivalent unit of production, they give you the number, guess what? They already did what we did in part 1, okay? Or they already did what we did in question 9. Okay, that was already done for us, okay? We got to figure out the cost per equivalent unit. And again, how we do that is to figure out the cost per EU. Or EUP, equivalent unit of production. We take total cost and divide it by the equivalent unit of production. okay? That's our calculation. That's how we get that, all right? I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to call total cost A. I'm going to call this A, and I'm going to call the equivalent unit of production B. Or I can say all I need to do now is just divide A by B, okay? So if I take $256,900 and divide it by 35,000, I get the cost per equivalent unit of $7.34 with respect to material. With respect to labor, I do the same thing. The total cost, $85,800, and divide it by the equivalent unit of production with respect to labor, which is $33,000. That gives me $2.60. And then I do the same exact thing with overhead. I divide the 429,000 by the 33,000 equivalent units of production. I get $13. Now, we want to figure out what is the, and you're going to want to add a line here, so just hit tab down here. Okay, so now we're going to figure out what's the total cost per equivalent unit. Okay, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to say total cost per equivalent unit. Well, that's easy because I have material. The cost per equivalent unit with respect to material is $7.34. The cost per equivalent unit with respect to labor is $2.60. And the total cost per equivalent unit with respect to overhead is $13 per unit. $13. Sorry guys, hit tab again. So if I add all these up, that adds up to $22.94. This right here is my total cost per equivalent unit. That's how much each use or each unit costs. Okay? And I'm going to double underline this. And again, if you have any questions when you come to any problems in Connect or whatever, text me, please. It's totally not a problem. All right. Okay, so your next problem in your study guide is study guide problems, problem 11. And it says, complete exercise 4-4. 4-4 wants us to calculate the cost transferred out. Okay, so we have to basically here calculate two things. First thing we need to calculate is the cost of the ending work in process, and then we need to calculate the cost of the units transferred out. Okay, so this third step, super duper easy. Why is it easy? Because we have all the numbers. We did all the work, right? So the first thing we want to do is calculate that ending inventory, okay, or the cost of the ending WIP. So we have numbers here, right? They give us the equivalent units of production, and they give us the cost per equivalent unit, okay? Guess what? They did steps 1 and 2 for us already in this problem, okay? We already did examples of steps 1 and 2 from the two previous study guide problems, okay? So here, all we're doing is just trying to figure out, hey, what's the cost of ending WIP? What's the cost of the units that were transferred out? Easy peasy, okay? So first thing I want to do is figure out the ending inventory, okay, or ending WIP, right? So what's my equivalent units? Well, again, if I look at my problem, $2,000 with respect to material, $800 with respect to conversion costs. Okay, well that's easy. I'm just going to plug that in. $2,000, $800. So that means in total my cost here would be $2,800, right? So step one, figure out the cost in the ending WIP. Step two, I need to figure out what is my cost per EU or equivalent unit. Well, that's easy because they gave it to us, right? It's $13.86 with respect to material. With respect to conversion cost, it's $4.43. So I'm just going to plug that in. 13.86 and $4.43. Okay? So now I need to figure out what's the cost of ending WIP. Well, it's easy. I take 2,000 and I multiply my $13.89 or 86 cents, excuse me. That gives me $27,720. With respect to conversion costs, I take the equivalent units of 800 times the cost per equivalent unit of $4.43. That gives me $3,544. So what's my total cost of WIP? Well, my total cost of ending WIP is $31,264. I added up my $27,720 and my $35,44. Okay? That's step one. Step two, or part two actually of this problem, wants me to calculate the cost of units that were transferred out. That's easy. Okay? First thing I need to take, or I need to know, what are the units transferred out? Right? These units went to the next department and the next department in the process. Well, the problem tells me that a total of 20,100 units were completed and transferred out to the next processing department during the month. Okay, well, with respect to material, they got to be 20,100 because they were completed and transferred out. With respect to conversion, they were completed, they were transferred out. Still got to be the $20,100, okay? Now, I need to take my cost per equivalent unit. Well, guess what? They're the same costs that we had in the first part of the problem. $13.86, $4.43. So what is the cost of units transferred out? Well, that's easy. With respect to material, I take the 20,100 units times the cost per equivalent unit of $13.86. That gives me $278,586. Okay. Do the same thing with conversion. Take the 20,100 units that were completed, transferred out, and I multiply that by the cost per equivalent unit with respect to conversion costs. That gives me $89,043. So what's the total of the cost of the units transferred out? I take the material costs and the conversion costs, I add them together. I get $367,629. Okay. Now the next thing we got to do, there we go. Okay, there we go. The next thing we got to do is to complete exercise 4-5. Now this is the last step in implementing the average or the weighted average cost to the process costing system. I need to reconcile the cost to be accounted for. What cost to be accounted for am I reconciling? Well, it's easy. The cost of beginning WIP plus the cost added during the period. I'm going to account for those and I'm going to compare those to the cost of ending WIP and the cost of the units completed and transferred out. Okay? So, if we read the problem tells us that Mary Am Corporation uses the weighted average method in its process costing system. The baking department is one of the process departments in its strudel manufacturing facilities. In June, in the baking department, the cost of the beginning WIP was $3,570. The cost of ending WIP was $2,860, and the cost added to production was $43,120. Easy peasy, right? Easy to do. Step number one, what are my costs to be accounted for in the beginning? Well, that's easy. I have the cost of beginning WIP, which they tell me is $3,570. So $3,570. Okay? They tell me what my cost added to production are during the period, the $43,120. So I'm going to say costs added during the period is the $43,120. Okay? So what are the total costs to be accounted for? Well, it's the 3,570 plus the 43,120 gives me 46,690. Okay? And let me just fix something real quick. I apologize. I am kind of anal when it comes to making sure the numbers look right in proper form, so to speak. Okay, here we go. So now I need to factor, or I need to compare the 46,690 with the cost of ending WIP and the cost of the units transferred out. Okay? Very easy to do. So what's the cost of ending? Cost of ending WIP, well, the problem tells me it's $2,860. Oh, sorry, $2,860. Okay. What is the cost of the units transferred out? Oh man, they didn't tell me. Huh. Can't do this problem. Well, yeah, we can. How can we? Well, we know a few things. First and foremost, we know from chapter 3 and chapter 2. Yeah, we know that if we take the cost of beginning plus the cost added minus the ending gives us what was used, right? So bear with me here. I'm going to come down here. You don't have to type this in your study guide. But remember from chapter, I think it was 2 or 3. I think it was 2 and 3 actually. If we take the beginning cost, right, which we know was 3,570. And then we take the costs that were added, which we know was 43,120. And then we subtract out the ending balance, which was 2,860. That will give me the amount that we used, right? Or the amount that was completed and transferred out. Okay? Well, guess what? I already know that these two right here have to equal up to 46,690, right? Because I already did it up here, right? I know that this bottom half, the answer, I'm going to just work with me here. I'm going to put an X right here, right? We know it has to equal the total cost accounted for. And we know that total cost accounted for has to be 46,690, right? So through simple algebra, I can determine that the cost of units transferred out was 43,830, right? Again, the takeaway here is recognizing that this is an inventory account, right? We got stuff coming in, stuff going out. It's the same thing we've already learned. It's just maybe like a different form that we're looking at it. We take the beginning cost plus the costs that were added to the period, right? That gives me costs that are available to be used. I subtract out my ending inventory. That gives me the actual amount that transferred out of that account. Or if we were looking at the cost of manufactured goods statement, looking at it from that perspective, that's the amount of material that we used, okay? Same concepts here, okay? So again, that completed out, and I'm just going to put it down here just to be complete, is the 43,830. Again, if you have questions on this, if it was as clear as mud, hey, not a problem. Text me. I'd be glad to have a phone conversation with you. We can do a big blue button session. We can coordinate times and get it done, okay? That is the end of your study guide, okay? I'm confident that these 4 problems will get you through your Connect, okay? However, if you run into problems, text me. I will work with you one-on-one. It is not a problem, okay? So there you go. Rewatch this if you need to. Take down those notes. But again, the problems in Connect are going to be identical to these 4 problems that we did. How do you calculate the equivalent unit of production? How do you calculate the cost per EU? What are the total costs to be accounted for? And reconcile the costs, okay? Again, if you have any questions, please feel free and text me. I have no problem working one-on-one with you guys, okay? So thanks for tuning in. Good luck this week. And again, to reiterate, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to field questions and whatnot. All you got to do is text me, all right? So have a good one, and we'll see you next week.